Welcome to another episode of Healthy Kidneys After 60. I am your host, Jane Pauley, and today we are touching on a subject that hits home for so many of us as the years pass by. Have you ever noticed that your legs feel a bit heavier during your evening walk? Or perhaps you have reached for an extra pair of wool socks because your feet just will not stay warm, no matter the thermostat setting? We often dismiss these as simple signs of getting older, but what if your body is trying to tell you something much deeper? Joining me today is a man who has spent over 5 decades listening to those very signals. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, a renowned neurosurgeon and medical visionary who has guided over 20 phase patients through the complexities of aging. Dr. Gupta, it is a privilege to have you here to help us decode what our bodies are whispering to us in our golden years.
Thank you so much, Jane. It is truly a pleasure to be here with you and your listeners. You know, in my 50 years of clinical practice, I have sat across from thousands of individuals who share that exact same sentiment you just described. They come into my office, rub their knees or pull at their socks, and they say, "Doctor, I guess this is just what happens when the calendar keeps turning." But I am here today because I want to change that narrative. Our legs and our circulation are not just mechanical parts that inevitably break down. They are a dynamic system that responds to how we treat them. I am genuinely excited to share some insights that might just change how you feel when you wake up tomorrow morning.
Dr. Gupta, I want to start with something that feels very personal to our audience. I hear from so many friends and listeners who describe this specific sensation of their legs feeling like lead by the time 4 o'clock in the afternoon rolls around, or that persistent chill in their toes that seems to defy even the warmest Florida sun. There is a common assumption among us that once we cross 60 or 70, our blood simply does not move the way it used to, almost like a river, drying up into a slow, sluggish stream. Is it true that we are biologically destined to have this slow motion circulation? Or is there a more complex story happening beneath the surface of our skin that we are failing to notice because we just blame the candles on our birthday cake?
Jane, that is such a profound way to put it, and you have touched on the core anxiety of millions. To answer you directly, while aging does bring changes, we are not destined to live with sluggish blood. Think of your circulatory system as a vast, intricate highway. When we are young, the roads are wide, the pavement is smooth, and the traffic flows at 80 miles per hour without a second thought. But as the decades pass, if we do not maintain the infrastructure, the lanes start to narrow. Debris builds up and the pavement loses its flexibility, becoming brittle. What most people perceive as just getting old is actually a condition where the peripheral circulation, the blood traveling to the furthest points like your toes and fingers, is struggling against a system that has become stiff and restricted. It is not that the blood itself decides to slow down, it is that the pipes are closing in. In my research across the US, Europe, and Japan, I have seen that the narrowing and hardening of these vessels are the real culprits. When the vessels lose their ability to dilate, to open up and breathe, the blood has to fight its way through. This is why you feel that heaviness. Your muscles are literally gasping for the oxygen and nutrients that the blood is failing to deliver on time. It is a silent struggle happening every second of the day, and because it does not always cause sharp pain immediately, we tend to ignore it until the legs feel heavy as stones.
It is frightening to think about our internal highways becoming brittle and clogged without us even realizing it, especially when we feel like we are doing everything right. We often hear about heart health or brain health, but the health of our feet and legs seems to get pushed to the background until we can no longer walk to the mailbox without discomfort. Many of my listeners feel a sense of resignation, a fear that if the pipes are already narrowing, there is no turning back the clock. They worry that they are becoming a burden or that their world will slowly shrink because they cannot stay active. Is this process truly inevitable, or are there specific, perhaps overlooked, factors that cause some people to maintain vibrant, warm circulation well into their 90s while others start struggling in their early 60s?
Resignation is the enemy of health, Jane. I want everyone listening to hear this clearly. Your body possesses an incredible, almost miraculous capacity for repair, provided you give it the specific tools it needs. The reason some 90-year-olds have the circulation of a person 30 years younger is often tied to the health of the endothelium, the thin inner lining of the blood vessels. When this lining is healthy, it produces a gas called nitric oxide, which tells the vessels to relax and open. As we age, our production of this miracle molecule drops significantly. But here is the catch. Many of us are unknowingly starving our bodies of the specific vitamins that act as the maintenance crew for these roads. We focus on general health, but miss the targeted nutrition that keeps the vessel walls supple. In my 50 years, I have seen patients who were told they just had old legs transform their mobility simply by addressing these hidden deficiencies. We aren't just talking about taking a random pill. We are talking about a strategic intervention to soften the plastic-like hardness of the arteries and turn them back into flexible, pulsating vessels. It is not about stopping the clock. It is about repairing the mechanism so the clock can keep ticking smoothly. If we can restore the flexibility of the vessels, the blood will flow like a vibrant river once again, carrying warmth and energy back to those cold toes and tired calves. It is about moving from a state of survival to a state of thriving, and that transition is possible at 70, 80, or even beyond.
Dr. Gupta, it is truly unsettling to think that while we are going about our quiet lives, our bodies might be screaming for help in ways we completely misinterpret. I often talk to seniors who describe their cold feet as if it were a minor weather report, something to be managed with a heavier blanket or a heating pad, never realizing it could be a flare sent up from a sinking ship. How do we distinguish between the simple slowing down that everyone expects with age and a genuine vascular emergency that is silently progressing in our lower limbs? And why is it that the legs in particular seem to be the first place where this breakdown of communication between the heart and the extremities becomes so painfully evident?
Jane, you have touched on a clinical reality that I see almost every single day, and it reminds me so vividly of a gentleman I treated not too long ago named Robert Miller, a 72-year-old retired architect living in Tampa, Florida. Robert was a man who loved his morning walks along the bay, but he started noticing that his feet were icy cold, even in the humid Florida heat. And soon, a walk that used to take 20 minutes began to feel like a grueling trek through deep mud after just 5 minutes. He did exactly what you described. He bought thicker socks and assumed his engine was just getting old. But when he finally came to see me, his feet were not just cold, they were pale, almost waxen, because the blood flow was so restricted that his tissues were essentially starving in the dark. I had to explain to him that his legs were acting like a biological early warning system, much like the dashboard lights in a car that flash red long before the engine actually seizes up. The reason the legs are the front line of this battle is simply distance and gravity. They are the furthest points from the heart. And if your vessels are narrowing or losing their elasticity, the blood has to fight an uphill battle to return, leading to that heavy, leaden sensation that Robert felt. When those vessels in the periphery begin to fail, it is not just a nuisance, it is a sign that the entire systemic circulation is under duress, and ignoring it is like hearing a smoke alarm and simply taking out the batteries instead of looking for the fire. Robert's story is so common because we have been conditioned to accept decline as a rite of passage, but those cold toes are actually a desperate plea for oxygenated blood that is being blocked by a wall of calcium and cholesterol.
Hearing about Robert's struggle makes me wonder about all the people sitting at home right now, rubbing their calves and wondering why they feel so fatigued after just a few steps. It seems there is a thin line between normal aging and a pathology that could eventually rob someone of their independence entirely. If someone like Robert starts to feel that heaviness, that sense that their legs are no longer responding to their will, what is the internal cost of waiting too long to act? And does the damage to the nerves and muscles from this chronic lack of circulation eventually reach a point of no return where even the best medical intervention cannot restore what has been lost?
That fear of the point of no return is what keeps many of my patients awake at night. And it is a valid concern because chronic ischemia, or lack of blood flow, does not just affect the pipes. It begins to wither the garden they are supposed to water. In Robert's case, his calf muscles were starting to atrophy because they weren't getting the nutrients required for repair, and the tiny nerve endings in his feet were beginning to misfire, creating that strange combination of numbness and phantom cold. If we let this go on for years, the vessels don't just stay narrow. They become like old, rusted iron pipes that can no longer expand even when the body demands more blood, and the surrounding tissue begins to undergo permanent fibrotic changes. However, the remarkable thing I told Robert, and what I want everyone to understand, is that the body has a hidden reserve of resilience. If we can find a way to soften those vessels and clear the path, we can often halt that decline and even see a reversal in symptoms. The heaviness Robert felt was his body's way of forcing him to stop because it couldn't keep up with the demand. But by recognizing that coldness as a cry for help rather than a sign of age, we were able to start a targeted protocol to nourish his endothelium. We must stop viewing the body as a machine that just wears out and start seeing it as a living system that is constantly trying to heal itself, provided we stop the neglect. It is a race against time, certainly, but it is a race we can win if we stop dismissing the symptoms as just part of being 70 and start treating them as the urgent medical signals they truly are.
Dr. Gupta, I think one of the most frustrating things for people in our age group is the feeling that we are doing everything by the book, yet we still don't feel the results we were promised. I know so many people who have a kitchen cabinet overflowing with various multivitamin bottles, herbal supplements, and silver formulas designed specifically for seniors, and they take them religiously every morning with their coffee. They feel they have covered all their bases, yet they still wake up with those same cold feet and that same nagging fatigue. Why is there such a massive disconnect between the supplements people are taking and the actual physiological health of their circulatory system? And are we perhaps being sold a false sense of security by these generic one-size-fits-all pills?
Jane, you have hit on a very uncomfortable truth in modern wellness. We are often over-supplemented but undernourished where it actually counts for vascular health. The problem with the standard multivitamin is that it is designed to prevent gross deficiency diseases like scurvy or rickets, but it is nowhere near potent enough to act as a therapeutic tool for a 60-year-old body trying to repair decades of arterial wear and tear. I often use the analogy of a house with a crumbling foundation. A standard multivitamin is like putting a fresh coat of paint on the shutters. It looks good on the surface, but it does nothing to stop the walls from cracking. For instance, when we look at something like niacin, which is vital for opening up those micro vessels, a generic pill might give you 20 milligrams just to check a box, but the clinical research shows that for someone with significant circulatory issues, you might need a much more specific, higher dose in a very particular form to actually trigger a physical change in the vessel diameter. Most people are essentially microdosing their health, taking just enough to stay alive, but not nearly enough to thrive or reverse the hardening of the arteries that has already taken place. Furthermore, many of the forms of vitamins found in cheap supplements are poorly absorbed. Your body might only be taking in 10% of what is on the label, while the rest simply passes through your system, leaving your tired legs exactly where they started. It is a tragedy of good intentions met with inadequate tools, and it is why I see so many frustrated patients who feel like they are failing, when in reality their supplements are failing them.
It is almost heartbreaking to think of the effort and money people spend trying to stay healthy, only to find out they might be missing the mark entirely because the dosage or the quality is lacking. We are told to take our vitamins from childhood, but nobody explains that the rules of the game change once we hit our 60s and our absorption slows down and our vascular needs skyrocket. If these generic formulas aren't the answer, how does a person even begin to navigate the transition from just taking vitamins to a targeted strategy that can actually reach those tiny capillaries in the toes and fingers? And what are the specific markers of a supplement that is actually doing the hard work of vascular repair versus one that is just expensive window dressing?
The shift has to be from supplementation to targeted vascular therapy, and that requires understanding that your blood vessels have very specific requirements to remain supple. When I consult with patients, I explain that we aren't just looking for nutrients, we are looking for molecular keys that can unlock the vessel walls. For example, vitamin K2 in its MK7 form is not just a vitamin, it is a biological director that tells calcium to leave the arteries and go into the bones, but you won't find the necessary therapeutic levels of it in a standard A to Z bottle. Most people are taking the wrong form at the wrong time of day, often alongside other minerals that actually block their absorption, creating a chemical traffic jam in the gut. To truly see a difference, you need to look for high bioavailability forms and dosages that match the clinical studies, not just the recommended daily allowance, which was set for healthy young adults decades ago. I have seen the look of shock on a patient's face when they switch from their old generic brand to a high-potency targeted protocol, and suddenly, for the first time in years, they feel a tingling warmth returning to their feet within weeks. It isn't magic, it is simply matching the physiological demand with the correct chemical supply. We have to stop being passive consumers of health marketing and start being active managers of our own biology, which means demanding quality and specificity over the convenience of a single weak multivitamin. Your circulatory system is a high-performance network, and you cannot maintain a Ferrari with the fuel meant for a lawnmower, especially when the stakes are your mobility and your quality of life.
Dr. Gupta, I want to talk about the psychology of taking these supplements because I have noticed a recurring pattern where people start a new health regimen with so much hope, but they quit almost immediately because they experience a physical sensation they didn't expect. There seems to be this deep-seated fear that if a supplement makes you feel different, perhaps a bit warm or itchy, that it must be doing something wrong or even dangerous. Is our desire for a comfortable or invisible supplement actually preventing us from using the very tools that could save our circulation? And how do we educate ourselves to understand which sensations are signs of healing and which are genuine warnings from our bodies?
This is a critical point, Jane, and it brings to mind a patient of mine, Margaret Collins, a 68-year-old former teacher from Columbus, Ohio, who was incredibly diligent about her health. Margaret was terrified of any side effects and had spent years taking flush-free niacin because she had heard that the standard form caused a temporary redness and warmth on the skin that felt like a mild sunburn. She thought she was being smart and safe, but when she came to me with worsening circulation and stiffening arteries, I had to give her some tough news. By choosing the comfortable version, she was getting almost none of the vascular benefits. I explained to her that the flush she was so afraid of is actually the physical manifestation of the tiny capillaries in the skin opening up for the first time in years. It is the sound of the gates swinging open. When Margaret finally tried the therapeutic niacin under my guidance, she did experience that warmth, and her first instinct was to panic and reach for the phone to tell me she was having an allergic reaction. I had to walk her through the process, explaining that her body was finally receiving the signal to dilate those long dormant vessels, and that the discomfort was a small price to pay for the massive influx of blood to her extremities. This avoidance of discomfort is one of the biggest hurdles in senior health. We have become so used to pills that do nothing that when we finally take something that works, we mistake the sensation of healing for a sign of harm.
It is so easy to sympathize with Margaret because as we get older, any new or strange sensation in our bodies can feel like a threat, and we are naturally more protective of our equilibrium. We have been taught that medicine should be easy to take, so the idea of a supplement that causes a visible flush or a prickly heat feels counterintuitive, almost like we are intentionally inducing a fever. How do you help someone like Margaret or any of our listeners move past that initial fight or flight response so they can stay consistent long enough to see the long-term benefits of opening those vessels? And is there a way to manage these sensations so they don't become a barrier to the very life-changing health improvements we are discussing?
The key is education and a slow, measured approach, but we must be honest about the process. I told Margaret to think of it like a physical therapy session for her blood vessels. The first time you stretch a tight muscle, it hurts, but that doesn't mean the stretch is bad for you. With niacin, the flush usually fades within an hour, and as the body adapts over a week or two, the intensity decreases significantly, but the internal benefit to the arterial lining continues. Margaret had to learn to reframe that warmth as the blood finally reaching the places it had forgotten. And once she saw that as a positive sign of life returning to her legs, her fear evaporated. We also discussed simple tricks like taking the supplement with a small meal or staying well hydrated, which can take the edge off the sensation without neutralizing the effect. The tragedy is that millions of people like Margaret are stuck on flush-free versions that are essentially inactive for the heart and vessels, all because of a 30-minute window of temporary discomfort. We have to be willing to be a little bit uncomfortable to achieve a lot of health. Once Margaret stuck with it for 6 weeks, her ice-cold feet began to feel naturally warm for the first time in a decade, and she realized that the scary flush was actually the best thing that ever happened to her circulation. It is about shifting our perspective from seeking instant comfort to seeking long-term vitality and understanding that our bodies sometimes have to go through a cleanup phase before they can feel truly rejuvenated. If you want to clear out a clogged pipe, you have to be prepared for a little bit of turbulence in the water.
Dr. Gupta, you used a metaphor earlier that really stuck with me, the idea of our arteries becoming like old rusted iron pipes or even stiff plastic tubes. I think for many people, the concept of calcification feels like something that happens to a water heater, not something happening inside their own thighs or calves. It is a terrifying thought that our once flexible vessels could literally be turning to stone, making every heartbeat a struggle. How does this process of hardening actually occur over the decades? And is it truly possible to take a vessel that has become as rigid as a straw and somehow restore the rubber band elasticity of its youth?
It is a gradual, silent transformation, Jane, and I can't talk about this without mentioning William Anderson, an 81-year-old retired park ranger from Portland, Oregon. William was a rugged man who had spent his life outdoors, but by the time he reached my office, his lower legs were pale, cold, and the skin had a shiny, tight appearance that is a classic sign of advanced arterial stiffness. When we looked at his imaging, his arteries weren't just narrowed by fat, they were literally encased in a layer of calcium, making them as rigid as PVC pipes. I explained to William that for years his body had been misdirecting calcium. Instead of it going into his bones to keep them strong, it was leaching into his blood vessel walls, a process called medial calcification. This is where a very specific and often ignored nutrient comes into play, vitamin K2, specifically the MK7 form. I like to call vitamin K2 the traffic cop of the cardiovascular system. Without enough K2, calcium is like a driver without a map. It gets lost and ends up parked in your arteries, creating that plastic pipe effect that William was suffering from. But when you introduce therapeutic levels of K2, it activates proteins that literally grab that calcium out of the vessel walls and shuttle it back into the bone matrix where it belongs. It is a biological reversal mechanism that sounds like science fiction to most people, but the clinical data is quite clear. You can actually reduce arterial stiffness and improve the compliance or bounciness of the vessels over time.
The idea that we have a traffic cop vitamin that can actually move calcium out of our arteries and back into our bones is absolutely revolutionary, especially for a generation that has been told to take more and more calcium for osteoporosis without ever being told where that calcium might actually end up. It feels like we've been given only half the story for years. For someone like William, who was already seeing the visible signs of this hardening on his skin and feeling it in his stride, how long does this rerouting of calcium take? And is there a moment where a patient finally realizes that the pipes are becoming flexible again? Or is it such a subtle shift that they only notice it when they realize they haven't felt pain in weeks?
For William, the realization came in waves, and it started about 2 months into his new regimen. He told me that for the first time in years, he didn't feel that shackled sensation in his ankles when he first stood up in the morning. It was as if the invisible weights had been lifted. Restoring elasticity is not an overnight process. You are essentially undoing decades of rusting. But within 6 to 12 weeks, the cumulative effect of vitamin K2 working alongside other vascular nutrients starts to manifest as improved blood pressure and much better peripheral warmth. I explained to William that we were essentially softening the armor around his heart and legs. He started noticing that his skin lost that deathly pale, shiny look and began to look more alive with a healthy pinkish hue returning to his toes. That is the biological evidence of the microcirculation reopening as the larger vessels become less rigid and allow the pulse wave to travel further down the limb. Most people think they are stuck with the pipes they have, but William's journey proved that even at 81, the body is still listening and still capable of restructuring its own tissues if the right signals are sent. We aren't just managing symptoms here, we are fundamentally changing the architecture of the circulatory system. It was a profound transformation for him, moving from a man who feared he would soon be in a wheelchair to a man who was back to walking the trails in the Oregon woods, all because we stopped the calcium from parking in the wrong place and turned his stiff pipes back into living, breathing vessels.
Dr. Gupta, as we listen to these stories, I think many of us are starting to perform a mental checklist on our own bodies. We often wait for a big event, an unbearable pain, or a total inability to walk before we take our health seriously, but it seems that the body is actually sending out much subtler smoke signals long before the fire breaks out. For someone sitting at home right now, perhaps feeling a bit of tingling or noticing that their skin looks a little different than it did 5 years ago, what are the definitive red flags that indicate the circulation is failing? And why should we be particularly concerned if we notice these changes specifically in the late afternoon or evening?
You are so right to focus on those early signals, Jane, because by the time you feel sharp pain, the vessels are often 70% blocked. I often go back to William Anderson's case in Portland because he had so many of these silent warnings that he just brushed off for years. One of the most common early signs is what I call heavy leg syndrome in the late afternoon. You feel like you're wearing lead boots, and it's not because you've been running marathons, but because your veins and arteries are struggling to move blood against gravity after a long day of standing or sitting. Another critical sign is a change in the color and texture of the skin on your shins and feet. If it starts to look unusually shiny, hairless, or develops a reddish-purple tint when you're sitting, that is a sign that the blood is pooling and the oxygen isn't reaching the surface. William also mentioned nocturnal foot coldness, where his feet would be like blocks of ice the moment he got into bed, regardless of the room temperature. This happens because when you lie flat, you lose the help of gravity to get blood down to your toes, and a compromised system simply can't bridge that gap. If you notice that your toenails are growing very slowly or becoming thick and brittle, or if a small scratch on your ankle takes weeks to heal instead of days, those are not just old age issues. They are direct evidence that your irrigation system is failing to deliver the white blood cells and nutrients needed for basic maintenance.
It is fascinating and a bit scary how something as simple as slow-growing toenails or a bit of shininess on the skin can be a window into our cardiovascular health. We are so used to looking at our faces in the mirror to check for aging, but it sounds like we should be spending a lot more time looking at our feet. For someone like William, who saw these things but didn't know how to read the code, there is often a sense of guilt once they realize they've been ignoring a crisis. If we catch these signs now, the heaviness, the color changes, the slow healing, is it truly possible to intervene effectively without surgery? Or are these signs an indication that the plumbing is already so damaged that only a major medical procedure can fix it?
The good news and the message I gave William is that these early to mid-stage signs are incredibly responsive to nutritional intervention because the vessels are still functional, just extremely stressed. When you see the skin thinning or the color changing, it means the microvessels, the tiny capillaries, are closing down, but they aren't dead yet. They are just hibernating due to low pressure and high oxidative stress. By introducing a protocol of vitamin C to boost nitric oxide and vitamin K2 to soften the larger arteries, you can often repressurize the system. William didn't need a bypass or a stent. He needed to restore the internal chemistry of his blood vessels. I told him to watch his legs like a scientist. As the protocol began to work, he noticed the heaviness in the afternoon started to lift and that shiny, tight skin began to feel more supple again. It's like a wilting plant. If you catch it when the leaves are just starting to droop, a little bit of the right water can bring it back to full bloom. But if you wait until the stem is brown and snapped, the task becomes much harder. So if you are feeling that afternoon fatigue or seeing those purple hues on your ankles, don't panic, but do take it as a mandatory call to action. Your body is giving you a grace period to fix the problem before it becomes a permanent disability. And the tools we are talking about, these 3 specific vitamins, are exactly what the maintenance crew needs to get back to work. William's legs eventually lost that plastic look and regained a healthy, vibrant appearance, proving that the red flags are actually opportunities for a turnaround if you know how to respond to them.
Dr. Gupta, we've spent a lot of time talking about what we should be taking, but I think we also need to address the healthy habits that might actually be backfiring on us. Many of my listeners pride themselves on eating a balanced breakfast, perhaps some toast, a glass of juice, and a cup of coffee, feeling they've started their day with a burst of energy and vitamins. Yet you've mentioned that even these healthy routines can be deeply flawed when it comes to supporting our circulation as we age. Why is it that the timing and the form of our nutrition, especially something as basic as vitamin C, can make such a profound difference in whether our blood vessels stay open or clamped shut throughout the day?
This is one of the most misunderstood areas of nutrition, Jane, because we tend to think of vitamins as static things. You take them and they just sit in your body until they are needed. But vitamin C, which is the master builder of the collagen that keeps your arteries strong, is incredibly fleeting. It stays in your bloodstream for only a few hours. That glass of orange juice with breakfast might give you a temporary spike, but by the time that afternoon heaviness in your legs sets in, your vitamin C levels have plummeted, leaving your vessels defenseless against oxidative stress. Furthermore, many people are unaware that the sugar in that juice actually competes with vitamin C for entry into your cells. They use the same doorway, and sugar usually wins. So you might think you're helping your heart, but you're actually creating a nutritional bottleneck. I also see a lot of people taking their supplements at night, thinking they are repairing while they sleep. But if you take vitamin C or certain B vitamins too late, they can actually interfere with the deep, restorative sleep your vascular system needs to regulate blood pressure. It is a classic case of right intention, wrong execution. We need to move away from the idea of a morning dose and toward a strategy of sustained support that keeps the nitric oxide levels, the gas that opens your vessels, consistent throughout the waking hours when your legs are doing the most work.
It's a bit of a shock to realize that my morning orange juice might actually be blocking the very vitamin I'm trying to consume. It feels like there are so many hidden rules to being healthy that it can become overwhelming for someone just trying to feel better. If the traditional vitamin with breakfast approach is failing us, how do we restructure our day to ensure that our blood vessels are receiving a steady stream of support? Is there a perfect window of time or a specific way to pair these nutrients so that we aren't just creating expensive urine, as the skeptics say, but actually building a fortress of protection for our circulatory system from sunrise to sunset?
The perfect window is actually about rhythm and pairing, Jane. I tell my patients to think of vitamin C as vascular fuel that needs to be topped off. Instead of one big dose that gets flushed out, taking smaller buffered doses twice a day, once with a protein-rich breakfast and once in the early afternoon, ensures that your nitric oxide factory never runs out of raw materials. This is especially important in that 3:00 p.m. to 6:00 p.m. window when circulation usually flags. Also, pairing vitamin C with the other mighty vitamins we've discussed, like niacin and K2, creates a synergistic effect. The vitamin C keeps the vessel walls strong, while the niacin keeps them wide and the K2 keeps them soft. I also advise avoiding high sugar foods within an hour of your vascular supplements to give the vitamin C a clear path to your cells. And here is a professional tip. Look for buffered vitamin C or forms that include bioflavonoids, which mimic how the vitamin is found in nature and help it stay in your system longer. By making these small adjustments, splitting the dose and watching the sugar timing, you aren't just taking a pill, you are creating a steady state environment where your arteries can finally relax. I've seen patients who were doing everything right suddenly see a massive improvement in their energy and leg warmth just by changing the time they took their supplements. It's about working with your body's natural clock rather than against it, ensuring that when your legs need that blood flow the most, the chemical support is actually there to provide it.
Dr. Gupta, it's heartening to hear that such small shifts in timing can yield such significant results. It makes the path to health feel much more accessible, like we are just a few course corrections away from feeling vibrant again. I'm reminded of a story you shared briefly about a woman named Evelyn Parker, who seemed to be a perfect example of how these tiny changes in habit can completely rewrite a person's quality of life. What was Evelyn's experience like when she stopped focusing on the amount of supplements she was taking and started focusing on the consistency and the timing of her care? And how did her body respond once she finally got the vascular rhythm right?
Evelyn Parker was a wonderful 75-year-old from Scottsdale, Arizona, a place where the heat can actually mask how cold your extremities truly are until you step into an air-conditioned room. Evelyn was supplement fatigued. She was taking nearly 20 different pills a day, but felt like she was still withering away. Her legs were so heavy by the evening that she had stopped going to her favorite bridge club because she was too tired to even sit in a chair for 2 hours. When we sat down, I didn't add more pills. I actually took some away and focused entirely on the big three we've been discussing, specifically moving her vitamin C and niacin to a split-dose schedule. I told her, Evelyn, we are going to treat your circulation like a garden. You can't just dump a bucket of water on it on Monday and expect it to survive until Sunday. We moved her second dose of vitamin C to 2 o'clock p.m., right before her afternoon slump. And within just 2 weeks, she called me with a voice full of wonder. She said, Dr. Gupta, for the first time in years, I don't have to rub my calves before I go to sleep. They just feel light.
That phrase, they just feel light, must be music to the ears of anyone who has lived with that heavy lead boot sensation for years. It's almost as if Evelyn's legs were finally unlocked after being held in a state of constant tension. It makes me realize that consistency is perhaps the most underrated vitamin of all. For those of us who tend to be a bit forgetful or who have struggled to stay on a regimen in the past, how do we build that vascular rhythm so it becomes as natural as brushing our teeth? And for Evelyn, once she felt that lightness, did it motivate her to reclaim the parts of her life she had given up? Or was she afraid that the improvement was too good to be true and might vanish if she missed even a single day?
Evelyn was definitely skeptical at first. She had been disappointed so many times before, but once that lightness stayed for a full week, it was like a spark was reignited in her. She went back to her bridge club, and she even started a gentle water aerobics class. The secret to her success wasn't just the vitamins, it was the psychological shift from treating an illness to nourishing a system. I taught her to pair her afternoon dose with a specific ritual, a cup of herbal tea, and a moment of rest, so it became a self-care moment rather than a chore. That consistency allowed her nitric oxide levels to stay elevated, which kept her vessels dilated all through the evening. What I want everyone to understand from Evelyn's story is that your body doesn't need heroic doses, it needs a reliable partner. When she realized that she had the power to control how her legs felt just by the way she timed her nutrients, she lost that fear of being a burden. She wasn't just staying alive anymore, she was living. And the best part, after about 3 months of this consistency, her skin lost that parched look, and her ankles, which had been chronically swollen every evening, returned to their normal size. It was a complete transformation of her daily existence, achieved not through a miracle drug, but through the simple, disciplined application of basic biological principles. Evelyn proved that it is never too late to reset your vascular clock if you are willing to give your body the steady, rhythmic support it has been craving for decades.
Dr. Gupta, we have covered so much ground today, from the traffic cop of vitamin K2 to the vascular gates of niacin and the master builder vitamin C. It feels like we are finally putting together a complete puzzle of how to maintain our vitality as we age. But I know my audience, and they want to know the bottom line. If they walk away from this conversation and head to their local pharmacy or health store, what is the exact blueprint they should follow? How long should they truly expect to wait before they feel that warmth in their toes or that lightness in their step? And how do we keep from getting discouraged if the results don't appear in the first 48 hours?
I always tell my patients that we are looking for a 3-stage recovery, Jane. It's not a quick fix pill, but a strategic reconstruction. Stage 1 happens in the first 7 to 10 days. This is the activation phase, where the niacin starts to open up those long clamped capillaries. You might feel that flush or a slight tingling, which, as we discussed, is the sound of the engine turning over. By stage 2, around the 6-week mark, the vitamin K2 and vitamin C have begun the deeper work of softening the arterial walls and clearing out the calcium traffic jam. This is when patients like Evelyn or William start to notice they can walk further without pausing and that their afternoon heaviness is fading. And then there is stage 3, the 3-month milestone. This is where the magic happens. This is the renewal phase where your systemic blood pressure often stabilizes, your skin health improves visibly, and the ice-cold feet become a thing of the past. The blueprint is simple but requires quality. Seek out high bioavailability niacin and embrace the flush. at least 180 mcg of vitamin K2 as MK7, and 1,000 milliliters of buffered vitamin C split into 2 doses. Do not settle for the cheapest option. Your circulatory system is the most valuable infrastructure you own.
A 3-month milestone seems like a very reasonable contract to make with one's body, especially when the reward is a life without the fear of losing one's mobility. It's about building a bridge to a better future, one day at a time. I love the idea of a renewal phase. It gives us something to look forward to, a light at the end of the tunnel. For someone who might be discouraged by the cost or the complexity of starting this 3-stage journey, how do you emphasize the value of this investment versus the cost of doing nothing? And what is your final word of encouragement for those who feel they have already waited too long or that their pipes are simply too rusted to ever be cleaned?
The cost of a few quality supplements is pennies compared to the cost of a hospital stay, a caregiver, or the loss of your freedom to walk in your own garden. I have seen the most rusted systems respond to this protocol because the human body is designed to survive. It just needs the right raw materials. I want to look every person in their 70s and 80s in the eye and tell them, you are not broken, you are just under-maintained. It is never, ever too late to start. Whether you are Robert with his cold feet in Florida, or Margaret afraid of a little warmth in Ohio, or William with his plastic arteries in Oregon, the path back to warmth and lightness is open to you. This isn't just about blood flow, it's about life flow. It's about being present for your grandchildren's weddings, about taking that trip you've been putting off, and about waking up without the dread of how your legs will feel by noon. My golden advice is to start today, stay consistent for 90 days, and watch how your body rewards you. You have the keys to the gate. You just have to be willing to turn them. The science is there, the results are real, and the future of your mobility is in your hands. Don't let another day pass where you accept failing as your fate. Reclaim your circulation, and you reclaim your life.
Dr. Gupta, as we draw this incredibly enlightening conversation to a close, I am struck by a profound sense of hope. We started today talking about the fear of aging, the fear of our bodies becoming heavy, cold, and unresponsive, but we are ending with a vision of a second spring for our circulatory systems. It's a reminder that getting older doesn't have to mean getting weaker, and that we have much more agency over our health than we've been led to believe. Before we say goodbye, I want to ask you about the spirit of this journey. Beyond the vitamins and the blood flow, what is the ultimate message you want to leave with our listeners who might be feeling lonely in their struggle with their health today?
Jane, my final message is one of profound respect for the resilience of the human spirit and the human body. For 50 years, I have watched people reclaim their lives from the brink of disability, and every single time, it starts with a single decision to stop accepting less. I want you to know that those cold feet and heavy legs are not a punishment for getting older. They are just a signal that it's time to change your strategy. You are not a burden, and your health is not a lost cause. When you take these steps, when you nourish your vessels with niacin, K2, and vitamin C, you are doing something much deeper than just taking vitamins. You are telling yourself that you are worth the effort, that your future still has color and warmth, and that you refuse to let your world shrink. I have seen 80-year-olds start this protocol, and 6 months later they are dancing at family reunions. That is the human side of medicine that no textbook can fully capture. Your body wants to keep you moving. It wants to keep you warm. It has been working for you since the moment you were born, and it isn't ready to give up on you if you don't give up on it. So, take heart, start your 90-day journey of renewal, and remember that every step you take with lighter legs is a victory for your independence and your joy. It has been an absolute honor to share these stories with you and your audience today. Thank you for listening, and please take care of those incredible hearts and legs of yours.
Dr. Gupta, thank you. Your words have been a balm for the soul and a wake-up call for the body. To our listeners, I hope you feel as empowered as I do. You don't have to settle for cold toes and heavy steps. The blueprint is in your hands now. It's time to move from fear to action, from getting by to thriving. We are so grateful you chose to spend this time with us on Healthy Kidneys After 60. If you found today's episode helpful, and I know I certainly did, please make sure to subscribe to our channel so you don't miss our upcoming podcasts, where we will continue to dive deep into the secrets of vibrant health in our golden years. We have so much more to share with you, from kidney health to cognitive longevity, all designed to help you live your best life, starting right now. Share this episode with a friend who might be rubbing their tired legs today. Let's spread this message of hope and health together. From all of us here at the show, I'm Jane Pauley. Keep your hearts warm, your legs light, and your spirits high. We'll see you in the next episode. Goodbye for now.